There's a state I want to talk about, and some of you know exactly what I mean when I say there are moments where everything just feels lighter. It's more open, like you can actually breathe inside your own life. I call it the expanded state. Not because everything is perfect, not because nothing is hard, but because there's a quality to it, a spaciousness where you're not fighting yourself, not fighting the moment you're in. You're just in it. And most people who've done any kind of inner work have touched this, even briefly, even without knowing what to call it. But then Monday morning, something happens. A comment, a message, a look from someone, a feeling you recognize. And that spaciousness contracts. Not slowly. It's happened very quickly. Like something switched. You're in a completely different state. It's tighter, it's narrower. Like everything filtering through a different lens. And that's what I mean by the contracted state. Here's the thing that nobody really talks about. Like most of us who are on this quest, who've done this work, who've read the books and sat in ceremony and done the therapy, we know about these two states. We can name them expanded, contracted, higher consciousness, or lower consciousness. We have the language, but knowing about them and knowing which one you're in real time while you're inside it, that's completely different. And the gap between knowing and being is what this video is about. Because people move through these states constantly, sometimes within the same hour, they are moving around these states. The question isn't which state is better, because you already know that. The question is, how do you actually recognize which one you are in? Like right now, while it's happening. That's what I want to talk about. And what these two states actually feel like inside the body, because I think that's where the real work lives. Before I get into what these two states actually feel like, I want to clear something up. Because there's a misconception that I see everywhere in this space. Most people think that contracted state means you're feeling negative emotions. Anger, fear, anxiety, and the expanded state means you are feeling positive ones. Peace, love, gratitude. If you believe that, you'll spend a very long time chasing the wrong thing. The distinction is attention quality. Not what you're feeling, how your attention is moving. In the contracted state, attention is sticky. It keeps returning to the same event, the same conversation, the same interpretation. Not processing it, just circling it. The mind is very fast, but it's moving very fast inside a very small space. In the expanded state, otherwise, attention is fluid. It can rest somewhere, move, return, hold more than one thing at the same time. Here's the second thing I want to mention, because this one took me a while to get it. The contracted state doesn't feel like the contracted state from inside. It feels like clarity, and when you are in it, you're not confused, you're certain. The case feels airtight. The interpretation feels obvious. Everything confirms itself, It feels like you're finally seeing things as they are. The expanded state almost never arrives like that. It tends to arrive quietly, with more questions than answers, more space, less conviction. So if you're waiting for certainty as a sign that you arrived somewhere good, that certainty might actually be the sign you've gone somewhere else. And I want to mention the cognitive dimension of these two states. This comes from Daniel Kahneman. No, hang on. Daniel Kahneman, Thinking Fast and Slow. He talks about two systems in the brain. And the system one is fast automatic. It reacts based on patterns. It blames before it considers. While system two is slow motion. That's where empathy lives, imagination, effort for judgment, the ability to pause and hold a question. Look at a situation from an impartial distance. Not because you've become a different person, just because something has slowed down enough to let the slower, wiser thinking actually happen. That's the theory. Here's what it actually felt like. There's a tightness, usually in the chest and throat or the shoulders. Most people don't notice it because it's familiar. It's been there for too long. It just feels like normal now. The thinking is very active, but it's moving in a loop. You are returning to the same viewpoints, building a case, replaying what happened, refining the interpretations, and each time you return to it, the case gets stronger, more evidence, more certainty. The mind isn't solving anything, it's consolidating a position. And people around you in that state feels like one of two things. Either they are in the way of something you need, or they are there to confirm what you already believe. Real presence with another person, actually being with them, interested in them, that's not really available. In a contracted state, other people's behavior is about you. Their distance means rejection. Their silence means disapproval. Their mood means something about your worth. And there's an absence of imagination in that state. You can't really hold the possibility that they are struggling with something that has nothing to do with you. You can't picture their interior life with any generosity. Everything is filtered through the question, what does this mean for me? The strange thing is, from inside this state, you often feel more aware, not less, like you are finally seeing clearly. Like the rose-tinted glasses have come off and you've been honest about how things really are. That feeling of clear-eyed realism is one of the most reliable signals that you are in a contracted state. And I remember what this felt like in my 20s. I just moved somewhere new, different culture, different rules, different ways of being. I don't have the code for it yet. Instead of being curious about it, I was terrified. Every interaction was a test I was probably failing. I'd walk into a room and immediately start reading everyone. What does their expression mean? Did that pause mean something? Why did she look at me like that? My attention was constantly scanning for the signal that confirmed that what I already believed, that I didn't belong here, that I wasn't enough for this. And I was so certain about people. I know what their silence meant. I know what their tone meant. I'd build an entire story about someone's interior life based on almost nothing, and then relate to them as if the story were true. And the loop was relentless. Someone wouldn't reply my message, and then I spent hours going over the conversation in my head, looking for what I did wrong, and finding a way to make whatever it was mean something about me. And underneath the loop, there was a constant low hum of resentment at people who seemed to move through the world easily, and resentment at myself not being able to do the same, at the gap between who I was performing as and what I actually felt inside. The shame was the worst part, not loud, just always there, like a background noise I'd stopped noticing because it had been there for so long. I didn't know I was in a contracted state. I thought I was being realistic, accurate, finally seeing myself and the world clearly. The survival mode is fully active. The ego is doing its job, protect you from a perceived threat. And the survival instinct doesn't distinguish between a genuine threat and a wound from 20 years ago that this situation resembles. It just responds fast, certain, constricted. And then there's the other state, which is harder to describe because it doesn't arrive with the same force. It's quieter, more like something settling than something arriving. The most accurate word I've found for it is spaciousness, not happiness necessarily, not the absence of difficulty, just more room around whatever is happening. A gap between the stimulus and the response, and in that gap, something like choice. Most people who've done real work have touched on this, even only for moments, even if they didn't know what to call it. Eckhart Tolle described it as the space between two thoughts. You take a deep breath, 3 seconds, and for those 3 seconds, you are free of yourself. No story, no case, no interpretation. Most people experience that and don't recognize it as anything significant. It arrives as a slight easing, a moment where a problem that felt urgent just doesn't for a second, or a quality of aliveness, color slightly sharper, the present moment slightly more present. In that state, other people feel different. Their behaviors stopped being about you. You can see that their difficulty might be about their own pain, their own contracted state, their own wound that this situation resembles. Their temper or viciousness are symptoms of hurt rather than of evil. When you can hold that, not just intellectually understand it, you are in a wider room. And in that state, things that normally feel urgent, status, what someone thinks of you, whether you are enough, they lose their grip. Not permanently, just in that moment. Grievances feel less urgent. Perceptions matter less. Physical appearance stop defining your worth. The case you were building just doesn't seem as important. And there's an imagination available in that state that isn't available in the contracted state. You can hold complexity. Two things can be true simultaneously. Someone can have hurt you and also be struggling. A situation can be painful and also make sense. You cannot know what to do and be at peace with that. I remember when this started to shift, not dramatically, not all at once, but there was a period where I noticed I was moving through the world differently. The heaviness that had been there so long lifted. Not completely, but enough that I could feel the difference. Creativity started thriving. Like there had been a door I'd been pressing against and suddenly wide open. I stopped feeling awkward in my own body, stopped calculating every interaction before it happened. Before, connection had felt like something I had to engineer, say the right thing, be the right amount of interesting, manage what they thought of me. In that state, I just showed up. I started doing things that weren't in the script I'd written for myself, things that were technically outside my comfort zone, but didn't feel like effort. And when someone was rude or cold or being dismissive, I had space for it. Not because I didn't notice, but because their behavior stopped feeling like a verdict about me. I can hold that they were probably in their own contracted state, their own loop, their own case they were building. That's higher consciousness from inside, not a peak experience, a wider room. Here's a question I keep trying to find an answer for. You can have years of genuine practice behind you. Therapy, ceremony, shadow work, journaling, meditation. You can have had genuine shifts, moments where something fundamentally changed. And then something happened, a conflict, a specific type of disappointment, a person who pushes a very specific button and you are back. Now slightly back, fully back, and the whole architecture of the old state intact. And if you've done a lot of work, the cruelty is that you can see it while it's happening. You can watch yourself contract, watch the thoughts narrowing, watch the old story settle in like it never left. And knowing that doesn't stop it. I used to think the point of inner work was to stop falling back. That if I did enough of it, the contracted state would just stop being available. That's not what happens. What happens is the time between falling in and climbing out gets shorter. The falls might get softer, but the fall doesn't stop. There's a reason for this, what's worth understanding properly. The nervous system doesn't upgrade the way the mind does. You can genuinely integrate something and understand it, feel it, have a real breakthrough with it, and the body still has its old pattern, still has the old threat response. The old contraction reflexes built over years, sometimes over decades. When real difficulty arrives, the body responds before the inside does. And the Panache Desai, a great teacher, names something here that I think is even more important. He says the ego isn't your enemy, it's a survival mechanism. When the contracted state fires, it's not a character flaw, it's the body doing its job, protecting you from a perceived threat. The problem isn't that it activates. The problem is when you are so identified with it that you think it's the truth, and there's something else underneath that. The situations that pull you back aren't random. They're specific. They hit a specific place. The same type of situation, the same quality of wound, the same feeling, being unseen, being dismissed, being left. How specific it is. It's information. It keeps returning because it's pointing at something that hasn't been fully met yet. I went back to China to visit my family not long ago. Normally when I'm there, I'm triggered left, right, center, and I need a long time to recover after the trip. I thought I had prepared myself enough so I would be less triggered this time. Little did I know. Within days, I was back inside patterns I thought I'd long outgrown. The comments about my appearance, my choice, my age, the life I was living that didn't fit the shape they expected. And I could feel myself shrinking. Not all at once. Each comment takes a little more space. Fear of judgment does that. It doesn't wait for the verdict. It starts shrinking you before the verdict comes. Until I was moving through that trip the way I moved through my 20s. Scanning constantly, managing constantly, and trying to take up less room. The frustration was overwhelming, not just at them, at myself. Because I could see what was happening. I know what this was. I had the language for it, the framework, the years of practice, and none of that stopped it. And the anger was loud, and the resentment was loud, and underneath both of them, that old familiar shame, the one that says maybe they're right, maybe I'm delusional, maybe everything I've built outside of this place is just a story I've been telling myself. The hardest part wasn't the comments. It was the environment itself. When everything around you, the people, the dynamics, the unspoken rules, is organized around a version of you that you've spent years to move away from. It's genuinely hard to hold your ground. It's hard to separate other people's pain from your own when the entire room is insisting you are the problem. I lost touch with my awareness almost completely. What struck me afterward was how precise it was when I had some distance from it. It wasn't random. It wasn't every situation that pulled me back. It was that specific wound, the one about not looking a certain way, not acting a certain way, not fitting the shape. It all sounds too familiar. Before I get to what the fallback is actually for, I want to share some things that help me recognize which state I'm in. They're not tools to fix it, not techniques to get to the higher state, just ways to see which room I'm in earlier than I would otherwise. Because the moment you see which room you're in, you are already slightly outside of it. That is the whole point of these tools. And the first one is certainty check. So when you notice yourself feeling very certain about something, a person, what a situation means, and why something happened, pause on that certainty. Not because certainty is always wrong, but because the contracted state almost always comes with a particular flavor of certainty. The case feels airtight. The interpretation feels obvious. Nothing needs questioning. If you catch yourself building a case, you're probably in the smaller room. The question isn't, am I right? It's, am I certain things are exactly what I think they are? It's a technique recommended by my therapist based on Byron Katie's inquiry practice. And the second one is, where is your attention looping? In a contracted state, attention has a sticky quality. It keeps returning to the same thing. The same conversation, the same event, and the same what if. Not processing it, replaying it. The content shifts slightly each time, but the loop is the same. You don't have to stop the loop, just notice it's a loop. That noticing is already a slight shift in your relationship to it. The third one is notice the body before the thought. This state usually arrives in the body before it arrives at the thought. A tightening in the chest, a shallowing of breath, a bracing quality like something is about to happen. Most people wait until they are fully inside the contracted state before they notice it. The body tells you earlier. Learning to read that sign before the story builds around it creates a much larger window for choice. And the fourth technique is the capacity check. One question. Right now, in this moment, can I be genuinely curious about something? Not interested, not engaged, curious. Open to being wrong about what I think I know. If the honest answer is no, that's information, not a judgment, just a signal. The contracted state closes curiosity down first. Before the thought gets loud, before the feelings take over, the curiosity goes first. And the fifth, the fish in water. Eckhart Tolle uses an image I keep returning to, a fish looking for water. It's surrounded by it, it lives inside it, but it's being told the water is somewhere else, something to achieve, something to find. So it keeps looking. And the more it looks, the more it confirms there's nothing there. A higher state isn't somewhere else. You're not trying to get to it. You're trying to stop doing the thing that makes it invisible. The contracted state is the looking, the trying harder. The wider state is what's already here when the searching settles. And number 6, the return practice. This isn't about getting to the higher state. It's about recognizing when you've left it and making the return shorter each time. The return isn't a technique, it's just noticing. I'm in the smaller room right now. That's it. You don't have to do anything with it immediately. The noticing itself is the practice. What changes over time isn't that you stop going into the contracted state. It's that the gap between going in and recognizing it gets shorter. The gap, the recognition gap, is what inner work actually develops. I want to offer something about the fallback that took me a long time to actually feel, rather than just understand. Most people in this space treat the fallback as evidence that something is wrong with their practice, with their capacity, with themselves, as if enough inner work would eventually make them immune. But Panache Desai says something that completely reframes this. He says the entire self-improvement industry, the healing, the growing, the becoming more, is built on a premise. The premise that something is wrong with you. And that premise is the illusion. If that's true, the fallback isn't evidence of a problem. It's the survival mechanism activating, the body doing its job, the ego protecting something that feels genuinely threatened. And the fallback is always pointing at something specific, the same type of trigger, the same quality of wound. It's information. The pattern keeps returning to the exact place where the acceptance isn't complete yet. What you accept, you complete. Not what you process, not what you understand, not what you work through, what you accept. The reason the pattern keeps returning isn't that you haven't processed it enough. It's that there's a layer of it you haven't fully accepted yet. This happened. It was real. It mattered. It's done. There's a difference between processing something and accepting it. Processing keeps you in a relationship with the wound. Accepting completes it. Needless to say, I was processing my wound for a long time. He also says something about why so many people stay stuck in patterns despite years of seeking. You've been trying to get acceptance and approval from people who don't love themselves. The contracted state is often triggered by a specific type of relational wound: not being seen, not being enough, being dismissed by someone whose approval you needed. You were trying to fill something from a source that was empty. That's not a failure of your worthiness. That's a mismatch between what you were asking for and what was available. Some of you who've watched my previous videos know I talk a lot about integration. It's the most pressing thing I've been working through myself, and something I hear about constantly from people in the community I'm part of. The fallback isn't the obstacle to integration. The fallback is the integration. It's where the real work lives, not in the inside, not in the ceremony, in the moment on a Monday where the old pattern fires and you catch it and you stay with it instead of immediately trying to fix it and escape it. The moment is the work. There's a pattern I've had for years when I overhear conversations. They were talking through the wall, voices in the next room. Something in me immediately assumed it's about me. That I did something wrong, that I caused it. My body knows before my mind does. The breath goes shallow. The chest tightens, sometimes goes numb, and then the whole system shifts into bracing, waiting for something bad to happen, and it can't quite name. I know where this comes from. I did a lot of digging. That logic made sense once. It doesn't anymore, but the body doesn't know that. So as an adult, I'm sitting here, I hear voices next door, and it starts. The numbness, the shallow breath, the spiral beginning to build. And something caught it. Not a technique, not a practice I reached for. Just I heard myself say, here we go again. And in that recognition, something shifted. Not because I resolved anything. I didn't know what my neighbors were talking about. I still don't. I stayed with it instead of running from it or build a story around it. I asked myself one question: is it actually true that they're having this conversation because something I did? Not to argue myself out of the feeling, just to look at it clearly. And in that moment of looking, the grip loosened a little. I'm not broken. There's nothing to fix here. This happened. My childhood happened. And it lived in my body the way it lived in my body. But it doesn't have to run the show. That's all the recognition needed to do. Not heal it, just see it. I've had several of the higher states to know it's real, not a concept, a genuine difference quality of experience. More room, more imagination, more capacity to meet what's actually happening. And I've fallen back many times to know the fall back doesn't stop. It gets shorter, it gets softer, it doesn't stop. And I'm less interested in achieving the higher state permanently than I used to be. I'm more interested in the recognition, the moment I can see which room I'm in. Because once I can see it, I'm already slightly outside of it. Already the observer rather than just the inhabitant. The work isn't arriving somewhere and staying there. The work is the practice of returning. Every fallback, every difficult moment, every Monday morning inside that old pattern. That's not evidence the work isn't working. That's the work. And I think this is the simplest answer to why any of this matters. When you are genuinely in the wider state, the way you meet other people changes. Something in you stops defending and start opening. The case you were building loses its urgency. What's left isn't complicated. It's just more capacity for love. Not romantic love, not spiritual love as a concept. Just the capacity to meet what's in front of you without the contracted state running the show.